Change is hard, not because you're doing it wrong, but because it asks something of you. Welcome to Change is Hard, a podcast from the Leadership Lab. I'm Audrey Blair, and this is a space for leaders who are learning how to sit with uncertainty, make decisions without rushing, and grow without losing themselves in the process. We'll talk about the moments that stretch you, the conversations you keep avoiding, and the quiet shifts that change everything. No noise, no pressure, just honest conversations about becoming the kind of leader and human you actually want to be. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to another episode. I don't know if this is becoming a habit or a pattern. I definitely want to change it. But once again, I am recording here in the evening, which it's okay. We'll make it work. But today was actually the start of a pretty busy period I'm going to be stepping into over the next few months. I applied for and was accepted into the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, which is designed for small businesses, entrepreneurs. We're going through a really intensive program over the next quarter or so, and I'm getting a sense and a feel of what that looks like. So last week I went through and put all the dates on the calendar, and just in one afternoon put on about 8 additional hours of just meeting time every week for the next several weeks, not including the time to prepare and all the work that we'll have to do in the in-between time. So I'm feeling when we were going through the process and interviewing, they were asking, okay, this is a huge commitment and it's 100% expectation and participation. You willing to put that work in and lean in or lean out and step away from your business where necessary? And of course I said yes. And now I'm starting to see what that actually looks like. But it's a great opportunity. I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. And there was no way I was going to say no and turn that down. So here we are, and we will make it work. But today was the start of it, and during the initial meeting, obviously that's all foundational and talking about what to expect and things like that. And at one point during the presentation, they just had a really simple, succinct list of what an entrepreneur is. And sometimes it's good to be reminded and to simplify things that we say and talk about a lot. And I thought I wanted to do a version of that for what a leader is, because sometimes it's good to be reminded and simplify a definition of what something is, and sometimes even talk about what it is not, particularly when there's so many buzzwords and cliches and things around it, that it's just good to simplify and be reminded of what it actually is. What, at the end of the day, are we ultimately trying to do as a leader? I'm not talking about competencies or skills, because those are things that you bring with you. You bring your competency, you bring your background, your wisdom, your value, your skill set. You bring all of that into your various roles, into your various leadership. However, what do you do with all of that? Ultimately, what is it that we're trying to do? So that's what I want to define. That's what I want to streamline. So I have three or four very simple things of what a leader is, and just quickly talk through it with you. We do know and have had experience. I'm sure you have, because I have as well, have had experience with someone that has the title of leader, but wasn't necessarily a leader. They had the authority, but did not understand what a leader is, and they were not being one, because a title and being a leader are two very, very different things. You also know that you can be a leader without a title. So it has nothing to do with the title. It really is about, are you doing some of the things that we're going to talk about here today? I also have people, my best friend, she always talks about how she doesn't want to be a leader. And at the end of the day, we are all leading someone, even if it's just ourselves. There is an element of leadership in what we're doing, but that's a different conversation for another day. But there are leaders of all kinds. It's a word that we hear: corporate leaders, thought leaders, community leaders, household leaders. And so what is it that they do? What does that even mean? So we're going to simplify it, strip it down, and talk through some of these things. So the first thing, and this isn't necessarily in any particular order, So the first thing that I'm going to talk about that a leader does is a leader creates clarity. And what I mean by that is a leader is there to provide direction. Where are we going? Where are we going? They have thought about a direction. They've thought about what's the landscape that we're going to be playing in. They've thought about what is it that we're trying to do or what are we trying to accomplish. And they're also good at articulating and being very clear about what that is, which requires some forethought. And as a part of that, they can also tell you and give you the expectation. What does that look like? So they can give you direction. And being a leader does not necessarily mean that they know all the ways to get there. They may not have all the details about how and when and all of that to get there, but they can provide a direction so that those around them can align and start heading in that direction. Because without it, there's confusion and people get lost. And when there's confusion, then people get irritable and then everyone's got an opinion about what it is that we're supposed to be doing. I remember when I was working for a company, I took a role and I was brought on to do some work with their partners. I was going to develop the partner program. Well, when I got there, I realized and I found out that senior leadership had not yet even decided what they wanted to do with this part of the business. Was it going to be a strategic point for the business? Which then created a lot of confusion because I certainly had ideas coming in, but I wanted to come in and align what was already going on with the organization. So for a while, we were just kind of looking around going, okay, well, what metrics matter? How are we measuring success? How will we know what success looks like if we don't define what it is? Because there's lots of ways that you can build a program. There's lots of ways that you can develop a department. But if you can't determine what it is to be successful, then that makes it very difficult for the people that you're working with to figure out what their day-to-day activity should be. And that is a part of setting expectation. And another element to that is setting the standard, right? So what matters? What metrics are we measuring? What does that look like? And even now I have to consider when I'm working with my team and I'm working with my assistant, she's working on creating some dashboards for me right now. And I have to be very specific about what it is that I'm looking for. Yes, we can talk about making it pretty and making it look good, but if the data is not accurate, if the data is not useful for me, then I'm wasting her time and we have to start all over again. So having some forethought, thinking about what the direction is, providing that clarity, giving expectation, being transparent about those expectations and saying, this is what this should look like, is something that a leader does for their team. It eliminates some of that confusion because confusion costs. It costs time. It costs money. We're not being efficient. People get in the way. And so when we don't have stated expectations, people just aren't sure what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And you've felt that, you've experienced that. I know that I have certainly experienced that. And sometimes we have to go back and go, what is it that you're looking for? And as a leader, that isn't a part of what your job is to give that direction. Obviously, that requires you thinking through that. Not so much all the details, but providing what that direction is. So the second thing that I want to talk about here is that leaders take ownership of the energy and the direction. So what I mean by that is they set the emotional tone of the room or the team. I was doing a talk last year at a conference, and at the end, I was talking about we were talking about creating safety for people to come in and talk about not being afraid to fail and be able to share their ideas. And this leader was concerned about making it too safe, if you will. And he said, well, how do we, if it starts getting out of control, if people are too comfortable, and I don't know what he was imagining, we didn't get into details, but his concern is, well, what if things start getting out of control? Well, that's where you, again, back to the clarity, you get to set the expectation and the standard for what it is that is acceptable. And this is also where then you get to give feedback and you get to be the calm in the room, even when there's ambiguity. A leader, and you know this, I say this, this is something that I'm going to say. Part of being a leader is building your capacity for discomfort. And we know that ambiguity for a lot of people is very discomforting. And so, as a leader, being able to manage that discomfort and manage that ambiguity without people freaking out or without people getting scared and thinking that there isn't a direction that we're going in. So, part of that is not panicking, being able to calm down any of the energy and setting the tone. Now, that doesn't mean that and you don't allow others to bring in their elements because absolutely building a culture requires everyone's input. Everyone has a different background, ideas, thoughts about something. So bringing that in, that is a part of the culture, but you get to create boundaries around what that is. And you get to create the tone, whether it's, hyper fast and active, or if it's more chill. And depending on, maybe sometimes that's dependent upon your personality. It really shouldn't. It really should be more what is needed in this role and for the team. So being able to look at the team and go, what does this environment need? And how do I bring that into this environment so that they have the space to be able to get work done? So the third thing that a leader does is a leader makes decisions. Even if it's messy, even if they're not sure of what the right decision is. Sometimes people wait and think that there is some right decision. Most of the time, there is not a single right decision. There might be multiple ways that something can go. And as a leader, your role is to simply make a decision in line with the direction that you're going, in line with the expectations that you've set out, and learn from it. So you have to know the difference between a puzzle and a dilemma and a paradox or even a mystery. If you're not sure what I'm talking about there, I did an episode a while back that talks about the 5 kind of issues that you're trying to solve as a problem that may not be a problem. So you being able to distinguish between what a problem is this simply a problem, or is this a paradox, or is this a dilemma? And each of those have a different energy and a different way that you can handle addressing it. But you have to be able to figure out what those things are so that you can make decisions, so that you can make them quickly, so that not only can you execute, so that your team can execute. It's amazing how sometimes we freeze when it's time to make a decision. And a lot of times leaders will want to gather more information. I need more information on that before I can make a decision. And I would say that very rarely that's probably not true. You probably have enough information in front of you today to make a decision. So if you could treat some of the decisions that you need to make as though I'm not getting any more information, I need to trust my knowledge that I already have and trust and be confident in what I've been able to do in the past, but also trust that if it's not quite the right decision, that we're going to be able to make adjustments in the future. But right now, my team needs a decision so that we can move forward. I got to tell you, it was probably months before we finally decided in that role that I was telling you about what the direction was. So I knew who to go after from a partnership perspective. Do we want large partners? Do we want small partners? Do we want to focus on how many clients they bring us, or do we want to integrate our technology into what they were doing? All of those things change the direction and the activity and the things that we do. So when we're able to make decisions and we're able to make them quickly and not be so worried about making the wrong decision, is something that a leader needs to get better at doing and be really good at. And why high achievers struggle with this is because a lot of times it's about the overanalysis. It's about trying to be perfect and having perfect clarity. But sometimes you just are not going to have that perfect clarity. We're just not going to be able to do that. So leaders make the decision in the midst of and without sometimes having all the information. Now, I heard a story about there was a military commander who he needed to make a decision. There was lots of things going on. He needed to make a decision in 3 days' time. Well, he told his team, gather information. So his team had gathered like hours and hours and hours of information in order to help him to make the decision. Well, in the meantime, he got called off to go do something else. So the night before he was being called to make the decision, they brought him the information. And one of the guys that was with him, he thought there's no way he's going to get through all of this information. The next day he showed up, he made the decision, he gave his decision, people got their marching orders and they moved on. And he got up the courage to go talk to the commander and say, Commander, I know we probably gave you 3 days worth of information to go through. And he told him, yeah, I didn't have time to go through all that information. My job is to make a decision, the best decision I can make with the information that I have at the time. And if it's the right decision, we'll know quickly. If it was the wrong decision, we'll know quickly, and we will be able to recover no matter what. And the leader has to have that confidence in themselves to be able to do that, and confidence in their team that there's going to be a recovery, even if there's something that's wrong. Now, I know, there are situations that are life or death. Most of us are not in life or death situations when we're making these decisions. Some of us are paralyzed about, what we're having for lunch tomorrow, right? So I'm not talking about life or death situations, but even in those situations, leaders really do have to trust themselves with the information they have at that time. So making a decision, being able to decipher the kind of a decision that they're making, and then move things forward. And then the last thing that I will say that a leader does, and this is paramount, is a leader develops people. A leader develops other leaders. So a part of this is thinking about, as you're leading, are you developing capacity or are you developing dependency? Can't tell you the number of times that I hear how leaders want to be helpful, and they think that being helpful is taking something off of someone's plate and taking the responsibility away from them rather than helping them to build their capacity to be able to do the work and solve the problem without them. Because every time you answer that problem, every time you solve it, every time you take it off their plate and you say, I can handle it, it's doing several things. The main thing is, one, you're not helping them to build their capacity or develop them. Sometimes you might be telling them, I don't trust you to solve it or figure it out anyway. I know that's not your intention, but sometimes that's how that can come across. And the third thing is, it actually prevents you from doing the thing that you need to be doing. Because what they're doing, you already know how to do. You've been there, you've done it. So let them figure it out. Provide guidance, provide pushback, help them to think through the situation, be curious about what they've already thought about, but not taking something on and creating dependencies. That is not a leader. A leader builds and develops others, including having a succession plan for who's going to take their place. Now, you might not be looking to move to the next level, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be building someone else up to be able to take in or step into your role in your absence. If you did need to be away for a while, or when you're on vacation, or should something come up, or should you move on to something else, who then can do what you were doing? Many times we want to hang on to being the subject matter expert for something. That is not a leader. A leader doesn't hoard information. A leader doesn't hoard the role. They're actually helping to develop those around them to feel comfortable to step in their absence. I remember talking to someone, this was a while back, and I remember him being so proud, and he said, I want to be the go-to person for everything in this role. He said, I don't want to have to go out and ask anybody for anything. I want people to have to come to me, and if they ask me a question, I can answer any question. And on one hand, that might sound very noble. On the other hand, that person was basically imprisoning themselves to that role, to that knowledge at that level at all time. And I knew that this person was very ambitious. That desire came out of ambition but he didn't realize that he was handcuffing himself to just being the subject matter expert, where if no one else can solve these issues without him, that's where he's going to be stuck, and that's where he's going to be. This also comes up with leaders that have been promoted, especially from the role where what used to be peers, now they're leading those peers. And they want to keep going back to those same tasks and activities because it's very comfortable. But the role now requires that you are developing others, which means that you also need to stay ahead of where your team is. So thinking that through, a leader, if we simplify it all the way down, a leader creates clarity. It's very clear. What's the direction? What's the expectations? What are the standards? We filter out how we choose. A leader then takes ownership of the energy of the team. They create the emotional tone of the room. They create the calm even when there's ambiguity. And they really help the team to work through all of those particular areas. So if one person gets panicky and creates an emergency, a leader should be able to come down and tone that down. Thirdly, a leader makes decisions. Even when they're not totally sure what the right decision is, they're able to move forward and have, with that ambiguity, with that discomfort. And then finally, a leader develops people along the way. So if we were to think about that in your role as a leader, are you doing those things? So what's not required, though, of being a leader, and this is also sometimes just as important, being a leader is not about being liked. And I know that can be hard for some because sometimes you have to make the hard decision. And the hard decision is not going to please everyone. A leader is also not about being perfect. That gets in the way often with leaders with making decisions. It's not about perfection. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be a leader. You do and should empower others around you to be able to provide the information that is necessary. And the more exhausted you are does not equate to being a better leader. If you're exhausting yourself, then there's an issue somewhere. There's something that's missing, or there's too much that you're taking on, or you're not creating boundaries. That does not equate to leadership. Now, if we think about just a couple of things of what a leader is not, a leader is not the loudest voice in the room. I have been in rooms where the most effective person in the room is the one that has said the least, or the quietest, or had the greatest influence. If it requires for you to be that person, sure, but it doesn't mean you have to do that all the time, because a leader is someone that is very curious and interested in what else others have to say, and then can figure out how to move forward, making decisions and who to place in a particular role, but that comes with you listening. A leader's not a rescuer, and a leader is not the person who fixes everything. That hero leader trap, it is absolutely a trap. When you think that your value comes from the one that can fix it all, you're trapped there. There's no way out of that unless you step out and allow others. You allow them to fail, you allow them to figure it out, and you allow them to develop on their own. Leadership, really, at the end of the day, is how you see yourself. It's more of an identity than anything else. It's not about the task list. It's not about the one who gets the most done. Consider how you show up in any situation. How do you show up when things are not clear, when things are ambiguous? So think about, where are you leading well? And maybe what's one behavior that you can adjust and focus on, and think about what you can be doing and where you can generate growth for yourself. Because leadership, we know, it's not about knowing more, but it is about developing that trust in yourself, that trust in your team, that team trusting you, so that you guys can do something amazing together. If you stop and ask yourself, if my title went away tomorrow, would my influence still remain? So this week, ask, how can I lead better? What is an area that I can focus on? Again, sometimes it's about getting back to the basics that will get us on the straight and narrow and get us back in the direction that we were trying to head in to begin with. All right. Thanks for stopping by, you guys. I'll see you next time. Hey, if something in this episode resonated, I want you to know you don't have to navigate it alone. This is the work we do inside the Leadership Lab, building capacity, strengthening decision-making, and learning how to lead with intention through change. If you're curious about working together, you'll find more information in the show notes. I'm glad you were here. I'll see you next time.